time that we have, and that's really fantastic. I'm excited about this topic. I was on a meeting 2 nights ago where people were particularly worried about one of the questions, how do you handle networking? Because the advantage of the FIBI meetings has always been networking and education. And so we got the education part covered. We got Garrett here tonight, and he's going to answer some great questions for us and really be able to help us try to work through this time that we're in. But the whole, Bronson just encouraged you guys to, use the chat box as a way of networking. Read what's going by on the right-hand side. At least for me, it's on my right-hand side. And be able to say that there's still an opportunity to develop your network, even though we're purely virtual. And so if you see somebody, put a bio up real quick, like experienced flipper, or wanted to grow past your Orange County network, and they're here to learn, if they sound like somebody you're interested in being able to talk with, then you can message them privately, and I really encourage you to do so. We don't want to lose the sense of community in this time. And it seems particularly to me, I feel like, to try to keep community, because we are going to be isolated and industries are going to be slowing down, and that is part of what we're going to be looking at. But you don't want to let that be just you that's experiencing it, when there really is going to be this meeting here. We're going to have, FIBI Pasadena is going to have a meeting on April 16th. We're having Bruce Norris. And so, continue to participate. Yeah, virtually. Bruce Norris is going to be, calling in like Garrett's calling in, right? We're going to do a virtual thing. So don't let yourself get isolated. Be willing to step out and continue to grow your business in the ways that you can by using these platforms. So I think Bronson, you already covered so the for investor, by investor, and I would simply, encourage you, like my usual teaching, like I try to teach something, my teaching is continue to define your own world. Don't let this virus define your world for you. Continue to reach out, continue to do what's necessary, continue to help people. I've had clients who have called me and said, Christina, I don't know what to do. I'm panicked. My business is going to disappear. I don't know. My rentals are going to be empty. How can I manage this time? And my question back is, what do you have to contribute that's specific to you? Like, I had one person I was working with who was a computer guy, and he's like, oh, my computer is going to disappear. I'm like, no, it's not. People need support in being able to reach out and using their computers to do that. You happen to know how to do that. You can help people work out so they can continue to reach out virtually. Help bring your gift forward in a time when it's truly needed. And so if you're good at property management or you're good at interior design, don't let yourself sit in the emptiness. Find a way to push that through the virtual platforms. Where can you contribute? Where can you make a difference? Who can you call out to? Who can you email? What Facebook group can you join? What meetings can you participate in to continue to bring yourself forward so that our gifts don't disappear and we don't stop making a difference in this world? So think about it. Write down 1, 2, 3 ways where you can make a difference sitting in your living room. Don't let this be an excuse to be less than you are. Push through this and be exactly who you know yourself to be. So that's my lesson for the day, right? My lesson for the meeting. So I think that's about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. I think too, another thing that we can take from this is just in the middle of anything challenging, there's always opportunity. So, Warren Buffett, there's a famous saying of his where he said, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. And right now there's a lot of fear in the market. There's a lot of people don't know what this means, what this is about. I'm not saying that, this is the time to go out and just pour everything into a certain asset or real estate or different things, but it's something to consider, just to really consider the pulse. The best time to invest in the last 15, 20 years was probably when they thought real estate was terrible, 2009, 2010. So I do think that there's some incredible opportunities that are coming. So it's very exciting. One of the practical thing I wanted to say is that, as we're socially, doing social distancing, pick up the phone, pick up and call some of your contacts, your friends, people that you know, even acquaintances, and just say, how can I serve you today? What are some things I can do to serve you? I'm going to mute you here, Christina. Okay. And then, that would be, okay. And then I've got Garrett here. Perfect. I'm going to introduce Garrett here and just talk about a little bit about Garrett. And I've known Garrett for a while. It's been a couple years, and he's got quite a colorful biography, which I like to talk about. So I'll just kind of read this. He co-founded a multifamily acquisitions firm in April of 2013 at the age of 26, and he started with D-class Section 8 properties in the south side of Chicago. So a little rough, as you can imagine. He moved from C to B class assets, scaled the business. He went from 0 units to 3,400 units in 10 markets. And rather than using third-party management, he built an internal property management company with over 125 employees to operate the assets. After 3 years, he got bought out of his shares and traveled to 17 countries and 33 cities all over the world. And basically, he joined Michael Blanc about the same time I did, about a year and a half ago. And basically, we look at assets that are 150 units or more. He's closed on 700 units in the past 12 months. And the goal is to get to 10,000 units in 5 years. So one thing I really appreciate about Garrett is that he's very honest. He's a great communicator. He'll be very honest with you about things. He's got a real tactful and honest way of approaching situations. He's very well studied on a lot of different things. And he's really, really good at what he does. For us, he helps find different deals, and just the changing landscape of finding deals and even some things that have happened recently are good. But I want to spend some time talking through his biography as well. But Garrett, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So what you guys might want to do, because it might pop up as my phone on there. Are you guys seeing my phone?
Can you put in the chat box? I put a spotlight video so you can spotlight. Can you guys see him in the center? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Okay, I spotlighted you in the middle,
okay,
so I got you.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. Well, welcome,
right,
Garrett.
awesome.
Thanks for taking the time. And even though you're traveling and wearing gas masks and all over the country, thanks for being with us again. I think it was a year ago you were with us. We had, I think, 82 people in Pasadena at the Fair Oaks Marriott. I think it was one of the largest crowds. We had one guy like literally sitting in the aisles because there was nowhere else to sit. So
yeah, that was fun, man. I was pumped to come back and do it again. But you guys had run a really great meetup, and I had a great time last time. So it was a no-brainer for me to come back and chat with you guys for a bit.
Awesome, man. Well, really good to have you today. We got some questions for you. I want to get people to understand who you are a bit. And then I know there's a lot that we've been talking about internally when it comes to COVID-19 and our response and how we're working with tenants and all that. So maybe we can start out in the beginning. Just kind of tell us a little bit about your story, kind of how you got into, multifamily. I think you had some other stuff you did before that with Cutco, and you did some other things that kind of prepared you for that. Maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, sure. So I started out, I was like a really troubled teen, I guess. I had a bunch of like offenses with the cops between 16 to 18 years old. And then the pinnacle of my recklessness was when I tried to steal a cop car, drive it into a tree. And,
I never heard this. This is great.
Yeah. So that was like the pinnacle. Like that was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, and so that it was like out of a movie. Like literally we tried to steal this car. It's a whole story in itself. But so at that moment I was like, I basically owed like 10 grand to the state for restitution for the cop car that I busted out. We threw a brick through it. Like it was just really bad. And so in order to make up for that, I had to go to college. So I just graduated high school and I was 18 and I was supposed to go to college, but I owed $10,000 as a broke teenager to the state. I had no idea how I was going to make that. My parents were like, listen, if you don't figure out a way to get this money, you're not going to college. And so I was like, oh shoot, I got to go to college. So, I ended up, I had a buddy who was selling knives, and I would make fun of him a lot. He like hit all my mom and all her friends and all that stuff for selling knives. So I was like, hey, can you get me a job? I mean, it sounds like you're making better money than the $3K a summer that a lot of people are making right now. And like, yeah. So I just went nuts. Like I didn't have a choice. Even though like I had my parents had already been hit for knives and everybody else, I just like spent every hour trying to figure out how to sell these knives better. And by the end of the summer, I had sold enough to make $15,000, paid off the $10K, had $5K left for college, and then I had to pay taxes, so less than that. But at that point, that kind of kick-started my career, I guess, in a way of like not being an idiot. And I got really into like personal development, and that I was speaking on stages. I was running, I ran an office when I was 19. So I paid for my entire college selling knives. I won a scholarship, basically, so I was pretty much like a fast closer, hardcore door-to-door salesperson. And I got all these amazing skills by the time I graduated college that would help me in the real world moving forward. And so that's how I kind of righted the ship. That really big moment was kind of the definitive moment for me to change. And so graduated college, and I decided, I wanted to, the best route for me next was to throw parties, because I was good at it. I liked it, almost like a Van Wilder, I guess, but like out of college. And so I moved downtown Chicago, and I just started like throwing, like just hosting parties or whatever. And then somebody noticed me, and then I figured out that there was this job where you could basically find the richest people in the world that want to party and bring them into different locations that are like exclusive, and then you get paid to do it. And I was like, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. So I started doing that, and it started to work. And I just kind of applied all my skills and knowledge that I did in the knife sales into this. And pretty soon I was taking private jets to Miami and New York on a whim, like just living this crazy, really fast-paced life, going out, 6 nights a week. And I soon realized that I was probably going to die early if I didn't figure something out. And so I was like, man, what do I do? Like 2 years into it, I'm like, I can't do this forever. Like, what's the pinnacle of this particular profession is to own a club or something like that. And those guys are miserable. So I just didn't want to do it. So one of my clients was going nuts, and he was buying a ton of bottles and just going crazy. And I'm like, hey, what do you do, man? He's like, well, I own 150 houses in South Bend, Indiana. I'm like, how do you do that? And he's like, well, da, da, da. And I had no idea what he was talking about. He was talking really fast, this Jewish guy. And so he wanted to fly his family to Miami or something and go out and party 20 nights in a row with me. And so I invited him to live with me for 20 days. In that 20-day period, we'd go out at night. The next day, he'd teach me about real estate. I'd ask him all these questions. At the end of the 20-day period, I convinced him to let me work with him. And so we started this new venture in the south side of Chicago, basically wholesaling multifamily deals to investors in Canada and China. It was wild, like this whole thing. So we were wholesaling like D-class deals in the south side of Chicago. And I started to make money doing it, like not that much. It was like 30K my first year, but it was something. It was a start. And so I was like, oh, I could get into this, like whatever. And so I'm still doing the nightclub thing on the side. And then fast forward 3 years, and I had investors. I had like a good understanding of what was going on in the markets. I had a lot of knowledge. And so we went to work for this guy who had 1,000 apartments. We're like, oh, this guy's got 1,000 apartments. We literally worked for this guy for like 6 months just to learn the game. That was it. I didn't make very much at all. It was just to learn the game. And about 6 months in, we were like, man, I think we can do this. Like, we should be able to syndicate deals, because that's all he was doing, was syndicating deals. And once we understood the kind of roadmap, we're like, all right, well, let's when do we do it? Like, when do we pull the trigger? And so we were terrified to do it, to actually make the leap and do it. And so we had this like random guy that we found. It was an 18-year-old kid that was friends with a friend or something. He's like, hey, I've been trading with my dad's, Ameritrade account. If you give me $5,000, I'll turn it into 10. And so we're like, okay. So you give him $5,000, turn it into 10. Give him $5,000, you turn it into 10. Pretty soon we're $120,000 in, and we say, hey, he turns him into $380,000 in 20 days. And so we're like, dude, what are we doing? Where are we working? We got this like genius kid. So we were like sitting at our desk working for this guy, like making like ridiculous amounts of money in the stock market. He was sort of a genius kid, we thought, right? And so what ended up happening is we tried to take our principal out. When we did that, he freaked out, said, you know what, I'm making a bet. We're gonna either lose everything or we're gonna be millionaires. And I was like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. And he did it. And we lost everything. The whole thing. That was all my savings. That's all I had at the time.
Oh man.
I lost it all. I went completely flat broke in that moment. I went to the bathroom. I threw up. And the reason I'm telling you this, I sometimes leave this story out because this is kind of relevant because it's more recent. In 2017, an article came out about this guy saying how he was like the future of online gambling. Things like Big Rob style or something. He's like this gambling mogul in Vegas. And then a couple of weeks ago, a new article came out, and I'm like thinking at the time, I'm like, what? This guy is like a gambling wizard now? What the heck? Private jets, the whole thing. And then turns out a couple of weeks ago, an article came out. He defrauded a guy out of $10 million, and he's facing, now he just got charged 20 years in prison. And I was like the first person he ever scammed, like one of the first. So this is kind of recent news that came out. But my point of this whole story is, in that moment, it forced us to start the company that day because we didn't have another choice. So a lot of things that have happened to me have been like almost like forced my hand. Like I was going in that direction, and then like something happened that was a huge momentum shift, and I just didn't have a choice, and I just went into it. And so, you know, we started the company that day. We had one of the guys that we were working with before on the houses in South Bend. He was our loan guarantor, and he gave us some money to get started so that we had like earnest money and all that stuff. We started buying D-class stuff in the South Side. We found some equity from a couple random investors, and we started buying these portfolios of like D-class properties in the hood of Chicago. That's all we knew. Horrible idea, but we did it. And so pretty soon we owned that first year 300 2- and 3-flat apartments in the South Side of Chicago, plus another 50 unit and some other real bad stuff. And then we started, you know, managing that, and then we bought a few other, like a 50 unit, then a 70 unit, then a 120 unit. And we had this portfolio going on in Chicagoland. And so we're managing all this D-class crap assets, and we get burned by management companies in the beginning, and finally we're so fed up with getting burned by management companies, we just start our own. We're like, we're going to just do our own. We don't know what we're doing. We're terrified. We're just going to try it. And so we did. So I remember we were so inefficient. At one point, I had 10 employees working for me on the South Side of Chicago on 300 units. And I was like, you know what? I don't think anyone's working right now. I think that people like slacking off. So I ended up firing all the people except for 2, and the portfolio ran exactly the same. exactly the same as it did with 10 people. So that's how inefficient we were at what we were doing. We didn't really know what we were doing. So yeah, this whole thing goes down, and then we ended up finding this, like, there was some broker in Hawaii. Like in 2013, the market was so much different than it is right now. You could actually find good deals. You could buy things in the 20s and 30s a unit. And like the landscape now is so much more overheated than where it was when I started, that by the time I re-entered, I didn't even know what to do. I was like, what? The prices have tripled. How do we even do this? And so we weren't that sophisticated. We just literally, like, if we knew if we bought something between 20 and like 35 a door, we'd make money. That we didn't even really underwrite that well. We just kind of like, we're like, we'll make money if we do this. And using that like philosophy, is we somehow scaled the business to 3,400 apartments. The stepping stone to get into that bigger apartment complex was we had that broker in Hawaii find a deal in Memphis, 380 unit apartment complex for $4.4 million. It's like, I don't know the math exactly, but it's like 15 a unit or something. And we're like, wow, that's not that much more than the 120 unit we just bought. Let's buy that. And so complete hood, horrible, worst part of town, like property, we bought it. We came in, we put $250K hard day one and like just closed on it in like 3 weeks.
Let me slow you down just for one sec, Gary. I want to slow you down. So just so everybody understands. So basically now when you're buying units, he's saying, you know, he was talking about 15,000 per unit. So, which is really cheap. I mean, we just closed on one in Huntsville, Alabama, where it's 65,000 per unit. And that was still like a really good deal, we feel. But you know, so anyway, what I want to share too about Garrett is just that he basically is really good at finding deals, really good at sourcing deals, and really good at working that process. So you're going through, so you're talking about how you built the portfolio to 3,400, you had your staff, you fired everybody, and yet the thing still operated pretty much the same. I want to move on to the coronavirus stuff in a minute, because I know a lot of people are really interested in that topic, but
Sure. Yeah.
Can you, and I don't mean to cut you off at all, because I know you have, I mean, every time I hear the story, I've never heard the story about you crashing the cop car into the tree. Every time I talk to you and bring you on, I learned something new.
I went a little bit further back. I have different stages I can answer at any stage.
Well, I loved your story.
I figured the audience has heard like the further up version, so I went back up a little bit.
Hey, I love the unfiltered. The last time Garrett came and shared with us at FIBI, he shared about they had this situation where they had a bunch of drug dealers in their D-class apartment, which is the lowest class of apartment. And they went in and like paid local police officers to go and like hog tie people at 3 a.m. and like throw them out on the street. And anyway, it's a whole great story.
30-minute eviction, yeah.
It doesn't recommend it, and doesn't recommend Class D as well. I think we'll come back to Garrett. I just wanted to really establish you. You know, I have a lot of respect for you as a business partner, but also as your abilities, and just I think you're one of the best at finding deals. And I know the landscape has changed. And kind of as we shift into the coronavirus stuff, why don't we talk real quick about the Memphis deal that we didn't get, and kind of the terms that were, and kind of maybe how that kind of shows where we've been at and where you kind of transition to kind of where you see us at right now.
Yeah. So I would say that we just bid on a couple deals in I think early March. Was like we went through the entire process. I flew out to the deals, met the brokers. The brokers knew us. We just closed a deal with them previously. I set all the cards were in the right place for us to win one of these two deals. We had one in Atlanta and then one in Memphis. And you know what ended up happening. So we had it all. Like I found the deals, I liked it. We put up hard earnest money, like $200K hard day one. We had all of our debt lined up. Everything was in place. And some guy came in with $800K hard day one to beat us out of the asset.
Let's just talk about that for 1 second. So just for those that understand, $800K, when you're saying hard money day one, that means you wire the money over and literally the money is completely gone. You've done really no real due diligence on the property. But if you don't close with the $32 or $33 million, whatever the purchase is, you lose the $800K. And so we were thinking about that with the 4 partners that we have in there. We're like, we each would wire $200K over, and then it's just gone. And then you're like, but it kind of shows you where we're at in the market, right? It's just kind of an overheated, crazy.
Yeah, like when people are starting to do that stuff, it's just like you're like, dude, come on, like this is getting ridiculous. And so I'll tie this into the coronavirus situation next. So a week after that, so we lost the deal. I'm like, shoot, well, all right, back to the drawing board. Then the coronavirus starts to hit. Then it hits harder, and now we are where we are. But the way it's shifted in this moment right now is the lending has become very, I guess, almost like transient in a way. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's become very shifty and frothy on the lending side because of the uncertainty in the market with what's happening with coronavirus. So lenders are all about risk. They want to mitigate risk. And with everything that's happening, what has shifted is now the buyers have more ability to step in. There's all of a sudden hard money is non-existent. All of a sudden, financing contingencies are coming back. We would never do a financing contingency. So like basically you could write in a clause that says if you can't get financing, then you can get out of the deal. Those didn't exist in the last year, 2 years. You had to go into a deal to win it with no financing contingency. Those are coming back now. Now you can put it in. I can put in a 60-day financing contingency, no hard money. And that's the first step. So the terms are changing around the deals with what's going on right now. But also, because the leverage and the lending is not as ideal as it was before, meaning you can't get as high of leverage, so you can't get like 80% anymore. You can only get 75 or 70%. You have to bring more equity to the table to get the deal done. So if I'm doing a $10 million deal, let's say, and I could at one point get, a couple of weeks ago, I could get $8 million from a loan, and now I can only get, 7 million or 7.5 million. I have to come up with more equity, which brings my returns down for my investors just to cover the entire capital stack. So that's what we're seeing. In addition, there are reserves. They want to have 12 months of your so your entire first year of your mortgage, they want to hold it in escrow over here, along with a full year of insurance, a full year of taxes, and all just holding it just in case. And so that you have to raise equity for that now, in addition. And then on top of that, they're increasing spreads, which means that the interest rates are going up. So all these factors combined are going to drive prices down. But we're in this really weird flux because the sellers think this is going to blow over and they're going to get their pricing. Most do, because it happened so fast. And the buyers are like, dude, it doesn't pencil anymore. You got to give me a discount. You got to give me a lower price, or we're not going to have a deal. So that's what we're running into. And today I actually ran into the first, I had a call with Michael and Drew, and I'm like, guys, I found what I wanted. What I want right now is I want sellers that realize what's happening and are motivated sellers anyways, so they're willing to drop the price. So the deal that I found was supposed to trade in the high 90s a door. I checked in with the broker today, and I'm like, hey, what is it? What are offers coming in? I'm just curious. And he said low 80s, like 80K unit. So right there's an opportunity. Now, here's the thing. If things shift back to the way they were, we just made out fantastically because we just shaved millions of dollars off of these assets. Now, if it continues to go down, you might be like, it's like grabbing a falling knife. You don't want to do that because sometimes it takes time to flush that out and really realize the true price drops that exist in the marketplace. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. The sellers have to realize that they're screwed. If they really want to sell, they have to be prepared to either hold or sell at a lower price. And does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I was going to say something. So you talked about how lending is changing. It seems to me from what you're sharing as well, is that kind of lending has really determined a lot of this. When lending is really loose and the requirements are lower, it just seems more and more like we can raise less money. The LTV is not quite as high. So instead of 70-75% like it is now, we can go 80%. And also we don't need to have all those extra reserves. And so, it does seem like lending, that in fact that it's changing, is really changing the way we go forward. But you're right, with this standoff between buyers and sellers. And now we're seeing, and hopefully we will in the future see, that some sellers will say, oh, maybe I'm not able to get this premium. And if prices do come down, you could even have potentially some panic on the seller side of like, well, I better sell now, because if I wait, what's it going to look like in 3 months? But it sounds like we haven't fully seen that yet, but that could be the next step.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty right now that if there is a seller that was motivated 2 weeks ago, very motivated, some of them may be finding that they really want to part with it now, and they think that they're going to drop their price out. I want to find those panic sellers that are like, dude, get me out. And I will take a haircut. I will take a 15-20% haircut just because I've already made a bunch of money before. I don't want to lose that. I want to get out. That's what I found today, and that's what I want.
How do you find those? How do you find those sellers? Like, like if somebody's listening, like I want to find those sellers too.
Honestly, to be completely honest, it's going back to all the deals that you thought were semi-interesting and checking in with the brokers and understanding what their new pricing expectations are around the asset, if they're even selling. That's part of it. So I would go back and look at maybe deals that didn't go under contract or are still in the market. Maybe they didn't pencil. Go back and check those brokers and ask them, hey, what are the new expectations? Maybe it's something we can make a deal on. And then you need to understand how to underwrite to the current market. And so like some of the changes that I make in my underwriting now is I'm lowering the leverage, obviously. I'm putting that reserve in. I'm putting my natural appreciation, some market appreciation, usually put it at like 2.5 to 3%. That's at 0 right now for me for the next like 2 years. I'm not accounting for that at all. And I have a cushion of vacancy now built in. I'm being like super, like I'm just throwing everything I was underwriting before out to the wind and reinventing things based on what I think it could look like, worst case scenario. And it's tough. It's not like there's a good answer. We're making projections and pro formas based on what we think is going to happen. So it is a prediction with insulation so that we have enough room to, if things do go sideways or don't go as planned, we're still okay. And the challenging part right now is understanding where that threshold lies because there's so much uncertainty going on. So for me, I need to underwrite to like 20% economic vacancy or higher sometimes some of these deals, depending on where they're sitting now, is I don't really even have enough data on April to see where collections hit. Like one of the impacts, and this is a good segue, but one of the things that's going to happen is people are losing their jobs. There's all this viral stuff out there right now about, social media is saying like, hey, you don't have to pay your rent, all this stuff. So if you don't communicate that properly to your tenants, they're going to not pay rent, and all of a sudden your revenue goes away and your property's worth less. That's going to happen all over the country.
We had it real quick, Garrett. Recently, we had, I think, the mayor of LA, I believe, I heard somebody say that he just said you really don't have to pay rent. Like you actually just don't pay rent, like in City of LA. So in California, I know there's certain states, there are things now that are like you can evict someone, and if you evict, you can as an owner. There's certain, if you don't fire any of the workers that are working there, you don't evict anybody over the next few months, then they will give you some sort of relief for that. But, and I know today is April 1st. So I know there's a lot of people that own properties in here, as people that own, single or small multifamilies or even large multifamilies. And for us as well, we're kind of thinking like, how can we incentivize people to pay? What happens if they don't pay? We'll work with them. How do you foresee that kind of going, in different parts of the country or just kind of as a whole? Because I know a place like California, New York might be a little more severe, and other places maybe not as much.
Yeah. So the first thing is if you're using a third-party property manager, lean on them to word it how they want to word it because they get to stand behind it. They're kind of legally bound by all that stuff. So what we did is we had our property manager come out with a letter that was fairly comprehensive. It just said like, listen, like we're going to work with you. Like we still are expecting rents, but we're going to work with you. If you have an issue, please contact us directly. And then a bunch of other stuff that we're all in this together. The problem is if you make it too strong and you're like, hey, you guys got to pay regardless, then you're going to end up on the news. At least if you're a bigger owner like us, like that's what happened. Like people are ending up on the news because they said you absolutely have to pay your rent, and then they look like jerks. And so you have to kind of make the letter kind of an in-between where it's like, listen, we're firm, but we will work with you if you need real help. If you've been impacted by COVID, let's figure out a payment structure. You can offer incentives where you say, listen, in April, pay us 80%, and then the other 20% will work out over the rest of the life of your, lease and stuff like that. So that if you take the deal now, we'll work with you on the rest of it. That way you at least get a large portion of that rent versus people just not paying at all. So you really need to lean on your property manager. If you don't have a property manager, you probably should bounce this off a lawyer, just to make sure you're saying everything properly. And the worst thing you want is to have a bunch of angry tenants and one of them throws it over a news station and now you're being blasted for being a bad landlord.
Right. One of the things that's interesting right now is that, they say I think a stat is that 40% of Americans cannot afford a $500 like unforeseen expense. And a lot of people are out of work now. I mean, look at the unemployment claims. I mean, I think the highest we've ever had in a single week of new unemployment claims was like 650,000. And this last week we had 3.2 million. So it's like 5 times more than we've ever seen, even in '08, even in I think since 1982 or something like that. It's been and actually it was actually been more because I think the highest one was in 1982. It's so substantially higher. But, like you said, dealing with tenants, and a lot of times people will think, oh, if I don't pay rent, then I don't have to pay it at all. And it's like, no, you still have to pay it. You just may pay it a little later. And so I think, like you said, having a plan of what this looks like. And if you do have a concern, let us know and we'll try to work with you.
Communicating early is huge. So you don't want this to be like an unknown thing, or they see something on Facebook so they think they don't have to pay their rent. You want to get ahead of it. So we had letters sent out last week to everyone. We're sending around more this week. And just to remind everyone, and then we're taking it on a case-by-case basis if people are having problems. Now, the way that so it's like a trickle-through effect. So the way that they're handling it is, a lot of states, they're not allowed, you either can't evict because the courthouses are shut down or they're not allowing you to evict. But tenants still owe their rent. They still have to pay their rent. So what they're, in that instance, they're trickling it through. They're saying, all right, now what are you as the landlord going to do? So they're offering what's called a forbearance, which, because we still have to pay the mortgage. If no one pays the rent, we can't pay the mortgage. They realize that. They said, well, we'll let you, if you have a Fannie or Freddie loan, you can actually push that out the payments for 3 months if you are being impacted by COVID. And I don't like that, because the way that they get you also is they say, listen, but if we do this for you, you have to agree to not evict anyone. And so, there's an argument for both sides, but here's the thing. I owe it anyways. Unless I'm in a complete liquidity crisis, I don't want to do it because I'm going to owe it. It's just going to make my mortgage payments higher after 3 months. In addition, I'm setting a precedent on site that we actually can't evict anyone. If word gets around like that, then who knows, maybe they'll start a chain depending on the asset type and depending on the tenants, of course, a bad omen around the property. All of a sudden, nobody's paying anything. So I don't really like the forbearance idea. I'd like to avoid it, but unfortunately, that's the only thing they're really doing for us right now as owners, to help offset all the potential, problems with collection. So we don't know yet. It's too soon to really understand the full impact of what's going to happen. I mean, we're definitely going to see something. It's not, it's impossible for us not to see something around it, but keeping it listen, the tone and the culture, listen, we expect it. If you're having an issue, talk to us one-on-one. Keeping that as your culture, that's the best thing you can do right now. And communicating properly with tenants.
Yeah. It is a fast changing environment right now. And again, we don't quite know what it's going to look like. There's some thought that obviously as we kind of put the brakes on the economy as a whole, I personally think the numbers when they come out after this quarter are just it's going to be more and more how severe it is in general. But I think going back to kind of the opportunities that will be there. And I think when you're in a time of uncertainty, having cash and being able to, pursue those opportunities. I will also say, from working with investors and the calls that I've had, there's been fewer calls, and I'll ask the question, what is your net worth? And this is, again, for people that are raising money or working with investors. So I'll ask, what's your approximate net worth? And they'll say, well, do you want it now or do you want it a month ago before the stock market started changing? So these are all things that are just changing. And even though our assets right now haven't gone down, I mean, people are still, we have, our properties are occupied very well. We haven't seen the effects of this yet. And we're very, I would say, very optimistic that we have a good plan and it's going to work out and everything's going to be fine. But I I think for some people, again, if people have some money in real estate and some money in the stock market, and then you drop the stock market by 30%, it makes people sometimes less willing to jump into something else, which I guess I can understand it, but I also think there's going to be some phenomenal deals available within a certain number of weeks or months. Within the next 6 months, there should be some great deals ahead. What do you foresee kind of like where we're headed from here? Like you said, it's uncertain. We really don't know, but do you have any opinions on kind of where we're headed, Garrett?
Yeah, so what I think is going to happen is we're going to have a pretty immediate in the short term. It's going to be very tough. In general, we're going to see it's going to be painful in the short term. So over the next month or two, we're going to be you got to figure out how to weather the storm, and the way to do that, I think, is to keep your occupancy as high as possible, and hold off on any large construction projects or anything that maybe doesn't need to happen. Just wait it out, retain the cash, so you're in a decent cash position to weather the storm. And then in the midterm, I think, it's going to take people a minute to warm back up to, just everything, like going out back out to restaurants, going, back to their job, like all this stuff. That's just going to be instant. People are going to have to get back into, the groove of everything. So you're going to start to see things lighten up, but there should be a decent impact, by then on the real estate market. And I think Q3, Q4, we're going to start to see probably more closer to Q4. That's when the deals are probably going to start to surface more so, because the operators that didn't follow the rules that I just said, or they didn't keep their occupancy up, they didn't keep a decent amount of liquidity, they're going to get rocked. And those are where the opportunities pop up. So the operators that don't know what they're doing, there's a lot of them. Towards the end of a market cycle, you get a lot of like shenanigans, because everybody's just jumping on the train, driving everything forward. And a lot of these guys don't even know what they're doing. They're just figuring out how to syndicate a deal, and they got into one and made some money, so they thought, and now they're going to get tested. The good operators and the bad will get tested right now. And the bad ones are going to get smoked. And that's where the opportunity lies for us to come in as good operators. If you are one, or bad, and you're just in a great spot to go get something, that's when we come in and take at the bottom, or if that's what's happening. I thought in the beginning that it was going to be similar to like a V, and the longer this goes on, and the more I see these numbers going up with COVID cases, I see it being more of a U shape, and 2020 is going to get, be just mayhem. But as we get into Q3, Q4, you're going to start to see some of it lighten up, and that's when you want to jump in and start with the deals.
Yeah, no, I like what you said, because I think that it's really important just to highlight a couple things. One is you talk about retaining a good cash position. Now, if you have a house and you rent it and it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. It's not as big of a deal but if you have a 100 unit or a 20 unit or a 50 unit or a 500 unit, it's really important that you start putting together policies, and just really, like, even some groups are saying, hey, if you pay rent on time this month, here's a $25 gift card to Amazon or to Whole Foods or something, just to kind of incentivize people to keep paying. And I know it sounds, but just people don't know what to do. And it's really important that we provide direction and leadership. And then also that as an owner, that you have enough cash to be able to survive. What happens if 20% of people all of a sudden decide not to pay? What happens if 30%? Are those things that are going to break you, or is it something that you can weather? And so delaying those bigger purchases and repairs and things like that are important. You're going to say, Garrett?
Yeah, one trick that we're doing is we're doing like $50 grocery gift cards, 6 of them for a property, and we're going to raffle. So it's like $300, but there's 6 winners. And if they pay by the 5th, so if they pay on time, we're going to have a raffle for the people that paid on time, just as like an additional incentive for them. And so that's just like a positive way you can incentivize people to pay on time. And so that was just one little trick that I wanted to share that could help you with your properties. If you hold some kind of a raffle like that, it typically works pretty well.
Awesome. We're going to take some questions in a few minutes here. Don't punch them in there, but be thinking if you have any questions. I did also want to remind everybody on the call that go ahead and introduce yourself on the chat. You know, I know there's been some people kind of chatting in there just as far as if you're looking for, a property, you're looking for a deal, you're here to learn like what you're here to do. Again, feel free. You can actually, I believe you can do a private chat to anybody that's in the room as well. So if you know somebody else, you can feel free to reach out as well. I mean, you mentioned about kind of, waiting for Q3, Q4, if you have properties holding cash, providing incentives for people that, pay early. Are there any other kind of advice that you give just as far as people that, are pursuing deals or have multifamily deals? I mean, what would you kind of, I guess, a word of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, the biggest thing is don't put too much pressure on yourself to make a big change or buy that deal or whatever it is. Just to be complete, you guys, it's so uncertain. Be okay with where you're at in your position. And I understand maybe for some of you, if you're trying to kickstart your real estate career or something at this point, it's going to be frustrating, but these are conditions that you have no control over. And so being calm and, having the attitude, like if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And being okay with that, not putting too much pressure and getting emotional. If you get emotional, you may make the wrong move and totally smoke yourself. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing worse than getting into a deal that you probably shouldn't have got into just because you wanted it to work. And so you kind of have to be just like, just like water in this situation and watch it. If an opportunity arises, you want to dip your toe into the pond and go after it, go for it. But make sure that you're protected legally so that you can get out at any time. Okay? Don't go into any deals without a way to get out at any time in the process because it's so uncertain. You don't know which way it's going to shift. If you're currently owning a deal and you let's say you were wanting to sell, well, be okay with holding it as long as you can, afford to keep holding it, hold on to it, or, ride it out. I don't know if I would panic sell at this time in this moment. I think you have to, as long as the fundamentals are good on your deal, I would probably just try to be okay with riding it out. That's why we have these assets. They're cash flow vehicles. They're long-term. And, I don't know if I'd rush into anything because you might get screwed on the buy side also. They may not be able to get funding or whatever else. So I think really I just think the biggest thing right now is not to get overly emotional, stay calm, and just go with the flow.
Yeah.
It'll happen or it won't.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Garrett. That's some really good wisdom. If you have any questions, go ahead and punch them in the box there. Start typing them in there. I want to say one thing that kind of comes up for me, and also it kind of goes in with what you shared, is just really when it comes to working with people, whether it's working with your tenants, working with your investors. We have a lot of investors that I get emails almost every, hey, what's going on with their property? Or what's happening? They really want to know what's happening. And so this is a time that it's really important to communicate very well. So be very, clear on that. We're working super hard right now, and it's not on stuff that we're making tons of money on. We're just trying to kind of make sure everybody feels comfortable, especially from an investor side. People wired over 50K, 100K, 300K, and they're in a deal, and they just want to know that you're thinking about this stuff and you're working on it. So with all of this, I think it is really important that we communicate well also with tenants, that we kind of lead them and give them some sort of plan going forward. So that's something really great with your property managers. So we'll go ahead and look at some of these questions here. Let's see. We got a question from Michael Gavidia. It looks like, what happens if tenants wait too long to inform the owner about failing to pay rent? Any comments on that, Garrett?
So what if they wait too long to tell the owner about paying rent?
Yeah, they just don't pay, and maybe they don't communicate it, and they can't get evicted right away.
If the tenant's communication is poor, I mean, it's like any other collection side. You just have to go through the normal process. If in your state you're not allowed to evict, then you realistically have to do whatever you can to get that money and ride the storm out until you can evict, unfortunately. There's nothing I hate more than when tenants don't pay, and then they don't talk about it. They just ignore you, and they exist everywhere. I mean, it's just part of the business. So, you know, try to cut a deal with them to get whatever you can. But if they're holding a balance, and when this ban on evictions is lifted, you know, you'll be able to go and evict them at that time. But, you know, just try to be nice and get whatever you can out of them right now.
That's great. Thank you. We have Ellis San Jose here. Ellis San Jose is one of the founders of FIBI. FIBI as a group, I believe, has 30,000 members. So it's great to have Ellis.
Wow.
Today's a note investor and watching investor sentiment. Looks like Charles Smith, we have a question here. Again, go ahead and type your questions in the chat box so that we can see them, and we'll call them out here. He says, when physical distancing lifts, do you believe it will be a good time for new investors to jump in?
You know, I don't know if I could time it like that, because you're putting a black and white line on a very gray situation. Yeah, maybe it lifts. You're going to see the stock market go up. But it's, again, like I said, people are probably going to ease back into their normal routine. I don't think it's going to be like gangbusters necessarily. So it's, you know, real estate, like the Dow can drop by 5,000 points in a week, like we just saw. Real estate doesn't work that way. It's slower. So I can't give you a definite answer if that's the best time to jump back in. It's going to be when I think the best time for passives to jump back in is with an operator that knows what they're doing, and has a strategy. The best time is if you have an operator you trust that has a strategy that is conducive to the market dynamic and the situation. That's a good time to go in if you feel confident and comfortable with it. Could be at any time in this cycle. Yeah, it could be tomorrow. It could be in we don't really know, but, you know, just if you're passive, put your trust in the operators that you trust, and, you know, obviously keep your head on a swivel. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't really tell you the exact right time to jump back in. That's
great. Yeah, it's hard to predict. I think another thing Warren Buffett said is we don't get paid to buy or sell. He's more talking about stocks, but just in general, we don't get paid to buy and sell. We get paid to wait. The temperament is huge. It's okay to wait. It's okay to even miss out on a deal. Be patient. And again, when everybody is saying there's blood in the streets and why would you ever do it? Like that is the best time to have cash and be able to invest. I just added a couple links here. Again, please add your questions in here as well. Today, Michael Blanc and a bunch of there's about 5 other people did a panel about the coronavirus. The link is here. It's a replay there. Also, Neo Bawa has stuff every week. He's got a great webinar. He's got a site called coronavirusrealestate.com. He literally is very well studied on it, and he's following very closely. So those are a couple things if you're really interested in getting more of those that have been really good. Do we have any other questions? It's only 8 o'clock, so I'd love to see if there are any more questions that anybody has. I guess if not, we've answered every single question everybody has about coronavirus. Ellis is watching for opportunities for financing. Yeah, what would that look like, Garrett? If somebody, like a seller financing deal, would there be a potential like for a seller financing deal? I mean, maybe not for the size that we're looking at, but even for smaller multifamilies or other type of thing, do you think this would be an ideal time for something like that? Or do you think that
there's always, if you can strike a seller financing deal, sure. But just know that, you know, they're going to use it to get their price. So you're going to set yourself into a situation where they're like, listen, I'll seller finance it, sure, but give me my price. Prices drop, you're kind of upside down then, right? So you got to watch that. You know, you could, you know, there's different ways you can try to piece together a seller finance deal that makes sense, but you know, just make sure you're okay on your pricing and that you're not overpaying.
This question comes from Marcia. She says, I have a 3-unit, is completely vacant. Is it a time to sell or find renters? I think that's pretty general. We don't know where the property is. I think this is Marcia.
Is there any reason why she's keeping it vacant? I don't know if there's any reason why she's keeping it vacant, but vacant buildings are never as valuable typically unless it's like a home and they're trying to sell to like a family. So I would fill it up and then see if the landscape is there and you're able to sell it at that point, I don't know if I'd sell a vacant property.
Makes sense. Yeah. Cause then if you're right, if it's income property, it's hard to sell. So we have Patrick Grimes.
Income property, it's not making income. So
exactly. So Patrick Grimes, he says, do you know any lenders that are still providing loans other than agency debt?
Yeah. So the best way to approach this, honestly, is find a mortgage broker that you really trust. And there's good and there's bad ones. The bad mortgage brokers, they're not going to communicate well with the lenders. They're not going to keep their finger on the pulse. And it's challenging because they all kind of come to you and they look like the same in a way, but there are better ones. Meridian has really good ones. Check them out. And, that's who we worked with in the past. And just some of the other brokerage shops they sometimes have decent mortgage brokers. They're going to help guide you. Don't try to go like in this environment, like lender to lender on your own. This is all those guys do. It's worth paying them a little bit extra, half a point or a point, to be my sounding board. So I understand where things are at all times. And so, yeah, there are other lenders in agency. There's still some bridge lenders, although a lot of bridge lenders have shut down their programs. And there's an uncertain future. I know Bancorp is still lending. That's who we used on our last deal. I like them a lot. So there are options out there, but just make sure you get with a mortgage broker that can help you sift through the good and the bad and give you a really, definitive answer on where things are at. Right now, what I'm hearing is that there's a 12-month escrow. There's between 70 and 75% leverage. Spreads are somewhere between 350 and 375 over LIBOR and bridge debt. And I think somewhere around 280 on agency loans. But they're like, listen, this can change. So the good ones are going to tell you that this can change. They're not going to sell you a pipe dream right now.
Right. That's good. This is an interesting question. This is from Michael Gavidia. He basically says, actually, I just scrolled down for me. The idea of what Section 8 would look like to have renters that are Section 8.
A good strategy to bring in tenants during times like these. So here's my thought on that. It depends on the area, kind of, because I know this audience, there's quite a few people in like LA, and I think Section 8's been a decent strategy. I personally, my experience with Section 8 is that they generally, if I took like 100 Section 8 tenants, I'd say probably 60 to 70% of them would just destroy my building. And so that's just out of a large sample pool. And it's, I don't want to just generalize too much, but it's typically what I've found in my experience is that you'll have, a Section 8 renter, they don't care as much about your property as maybe you do. And so if you went and renovated it fully and now it's like this brand new property and they bust it up, then you just like lost all your money basically. So like what I did is my properties is I would renovate it, like the D-class, like make them amazing so that the Section 8 renters would want to rent them. And then they get in there and then they destroy the whole place. And now I'm back to square one. I got my new renter, rehab the whole thing. And that deferred maintenance over time adds up, and it lowers your property value every time they do that. So you got to now here renovate it again. It's like flipping a house again. It's stupid. So I'm not a huge, unless you're just doing a strictly cash flow, you have in-house management or you're managing it yourself or something like that. It's a very tedious process. I would avoid Section 8 if you can.
Great. We're going to get a steady stream of questions now, which is good. Fred Sanchez asked, what do you think of commercial real estate, such as retail, office, industrial, et cetera? What would it look like now and maybe in 6 to 12 months? Any opinions on that?
The strongest asset class is likely in any recession, and you can look through history, is multifamily, just generally. And the guys that I know, so I'm friends with a guy named Ken McElroy. He's Robert Kiyosaki is like his investor, and he's like, listen, I've tried it all. I've done all of it, and multifamily is the best by far. So retail is likely going to get smoked. I mean, I'm in a group called EO, Bronson Hill as well. And so I have a lot of like business owners that I'm in contact with now, and they're like, I'm not paying my rent. You know, they don't want to pay the landlord's rent on their retail spaces and stuff like that. So it's not, I think it's going to get hit harder, if anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the industrial, like Amazon and like just stuff like that, I think will be fine, obviously, as long as there's, you know, good tenants in the space. So that might be able to weather it, but generally, I think multifamily is still positioned the best to be able to handle this kind of situation.
Thanks, Garrett. So this question came from Diana. This is basically a question about SBA loans, about small business administration loans. I know we've had some conversation. You've done a little bit of work and digging on this. Can you maybe give just a little bit of information about how that could benefit multifamily owners and if you'd recommend it or not?
Did you say SBA?
SBA loans, yeah.
Yeah, so I looked into the SBA situation. I've actually filed the disaster SBA online. I'm by no means am I an expert on any of the SBA stuff, but I know that apparently you can get a $10,000 grant even if you're denied on your SBA loan, and then they'll choose how much you can get on the other side. So you can get up to, I think, $2 million right now. And you have to, some of that is forgivable, like if you're using it for payroll and then certain operating expenses, it may be forgivable down the road, but anything over that $10,000 grant is going to be charged at like just under 4%. And so it is, a lot of businesses are trying to utilize that right now, but we don't know when. We don't know when we're going to get it. We, you know, it's all very new. So if I were you, honestly, I would just dig into as much as possible. Try to get on the phone with SBA. Try to see, because I don't even think they have all the rules figured out completely. And there's new programs coming out like the CARES Act and the PPL and just different things like that that you can take advantage of. I would not wait on it because once the money runs out, there's no more to give. So you have to kind of really take action now. Just apply. Like there's no issue if you apply and you put in a bunch of numbers, like estimated numbers. It's not, you know, there's no wrong in doing that. And you know, worst case scenario, they're going to deny you and you won't get anything. But if you win, and if they do grant you, you know, a $10,000 grant or some, you know, forgivable loan, it could really help you out. So, you know, I've done that on one of our properties, and I've done it for my own personal LLC and, you know, stuff. I'm seeing how it goes, and I'm trying to, you know, understand and you know, gain knowledge as much as possible, as quickly as possible, so that I can stay ahead of it. And that's what I suggest to do.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, someone said your banker. Yeah, the PPP, there's a pay protection program and SBA loans. Your banker will be able to give you guidance on that better than I can.
So some of this, as I understand, Garrett, some of this is new stuff that's just been given because of the CARES Act or the $2 trillion. Like some of this is related to that, correct? So some of this stuff is still being decided, kind of exactly what it looks like, correct? Or is this completely independent of that? Okay, cool. So we're still kind of sorting some of that out. Where do we find out info on the CARES Act? So yeah, a banker would know that. You can also reach out to me or Garrett privately. We share some of that. Please keep your questions coming. I think we have one more question, and then I'd love to, you know, we do have a little more time. One question that comes, this is a little bit off topic, but just about getting connected to a good operator. I have a couple of thoughts on that real quick. I think if you obviously going to meetups, you can meet great operators. It's a little challenging now. The nice thing is there are a lot of people online. If you search, you know, who are some of the well-known operators, I mean, I can think of a bunch, but just find out who's putting out information, who has a certain amount of information out there, who's creating resources and training. I don't know if there's necessarily a list, but if you go to some of these panels or people that are speaking different places, it's a good thought. Any thoughts from you, Garrett, as far as a good way to find a good operator?
Yeah, you know, I think you're going to have to do your homework, because there are operators that are like, they can pull the wool over your eyes as well, to be honest. And we probably know some of them, you know, specifically, and it's tough to fish them out sometimes. So, you know, I would just be very, you know, just have like questions that you want to ask that just kind of, you know, talk about the deals that they've done in the past, you know, how they're projected, how they performed in the past, you know, just different ways different questions you can ask to really get into their experience as an operator in general, and look at the types of deals that they do, how they raise their money, what markets are in, stuff like that. And, you know, just come up with any kind of question. A lot of people that are, you know, if you're investing $100,000 into a deal, I mean, you're probably going to be good at coming up with a way to dig into these operators, but don't just invest on emotion. Just feeling, oh, this sounds great. You know, do your homework on the operator before you, and then the way I would do it is I'd pick like a handful or a few operators that you like, put in like, you know, whatever you're comfortable with, you know, if it's a minimum, if it's more than that, whatever, and then do that over multiple deals. And that's the best, I think, the best method. You don't want to, you know, blow through a large amount of one. Don't put all your eggs in one deal. I wouldn't recommend anyone do that. Spread it out over a few deals, because sometimes even if you have amazing operators, you know, you can get a bad egg here and there. It's not uncommon. But for the most part, you know, you want to be very strict on the operators that you choose to work with, and, you know, don't go with like a newbie guy that has an idea that he wants to do this one day, and it's your friend. That won't end well.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for that. I would also say too, I mean, there's just a lot of things that you can give a lot of good examples. If you're going to talk to prior investors, that's helpful. If you can see some of the prior deals they've done, ask them what went wrong in a deal. Sometimes you ask what went wrong. What's the worst deal you've had? And then how on it. And it's honestly good to invest in somebody where they'll be honest about things that they did wrong. If they haven't done anything wrong, then they probably haven't had enough experience. So there's so much to learn in this.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. There should be a you know, bad deal that someone's done, because everybody's done one at some point. If you've done enough of them, you've done a bad deal at some point. And if someone's honest about it and tells you what they learned from it, then, you know, I think that makes them more trustworthy than not. The guy that's selling the pipe dreams, like, I've never made a mistake in my life and blah, 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 or I've never had a deal go south, or whatever. I'd be more cautious of those people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We've got a question here from Jeff Welch. He says, are you considering refinancing any of your properties at this time of the drop in interest rates, which I don't know if we're really there now, but is it possible in this environment? Any comment on interest rates?
So here's the thing. If you got like Fannie's going to be backed up if you're trying to do this. So I would say, yeah, if you have a smaller property, I would go for the refi, or even bigger ones. I mean, depending on where you're at in your debt, like where, you know, if you have a massive prepay, you want to see if the savings and interest rate is going to make sense to go in and eat that prepay in order to do it. So it might not be worth it in that, like if you have long-term debt on there. But if you have like flexible debt and it's like at 5% or something like that interest, and you can refi out and get 3.5%, I would do it for sure. Like there's no reason not to. Where we're at with our deals is we're pretty much like I relocked my last deal at like 3.5%. So I can't get much better than that. So I'm good there. And then the other one's a bridge loan. So that one, you know, we're fine on that one too. So, you know, it's just, you gotta look at each specific deal where you're at in the process. And if it makes sense to do it, go for it.
Hey, Garrett, this is a little off topic. I'll just see if anybody has any more questions, but you told me this story. You're like a guy that has stories that, like, the longer I know you, the more these like just outrageous stories come out. But can you tell us the modified version of the story about how you got a call from Grant Cardone, his team basically saying, hey, I need you on a plane to come on and interview for this job. Can you just tell us that story real quick? I think it's just like the best story.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I was in Chicago actually. I was celebrating I was supposed to celebrate my birthday. It was like a Monday night, and I was going to go out with some old friends. I live in Arizona now. So I was visiting, and I got a random phone call. Like a couple weeks ago, there was like Grant Cardone was on social media, and I'm like I was like a huge fan of, like, read all his books or whatever. And I was like, you know, he's like, we need an experienced multifamily operator. If you have experience, leave us a video message or something like that, 60-minute video message, and whatever. And so I just sent one in randomly, and then 3 weeks later, on my birthday dinner, I got a call from their COO, and she's like, "Hey, we need you to fly to Miami tomorrow." I'm like, "Well, okay, well that's fine, but I don't have a suit. I'm just traveling." She's like, well, you better find one." I'm like, what? I'm like, all right, well then give me till Wednesday or whatever. She's like, all right, fine, Wednesday. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like calling suit places in Chicago. I'm like, this is absurd. And I can't get a suit in time. So I fly using points back to Arizona to grab my suit, to fly to Miami, to show up at the 10X office on Wednesday morning. And I just went in to the 10X office. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I'm here. And, I met everybody. I interviewed their CFO. I talked to their COO. I talked to Jared and all those guys. And then Grant came walking in. He's like, let's talk. Pulled me in the room, and we just sat there and chopped it up for 2 hours about everything about his business and what he needs help with. The guy, I got credit the guy. He thinks really, really big. And so, I don't want to go too much into detail about it, but I didn't see it as being a great fit for me. He wanted me to move to Florida at that time. And I've been a partner in all these deals all my life. He wanted to make me a payroll employee. And looking back, I had a decision. I was like, do I go for the glitz and glamour of being in this, role, or do I just stick true to what I know? And so I had a lot of friends that were like, dude, you got to go do it, and this and that. And I was like, he made me a job offer at the end of it, and to run Cardone Capital on payroll. And he just fired all of 80 people or something, 44% of his staff. So that probably would have been me at that time. That was 2 weeks ago. So I'm like, well, I guess I made the right decision. But it was, it was really, really random and a very cool experience. I'm grateful for it. There's a lot more craziness that goes on, but I really don't want to talk too much about it. But it was just wild that happened kind of out of nowhere. So I could have been running Cardone Capital, and I could also be jobless if I didn't choose to just go my own path again.
Of course, what you share with me is you get paid about 10 times less working for Cardone Capital. So it's he wanted to payroll you versus it's really amazing too. I think the idea of joining a group and being a partner and being an equity partner versus being an employee. And again, it goes back to kind of the rich dad, poor dad, or cash flow quadrant, where are you an employee? Are you self-employed? Are you actually somebody who's on the business side and you're gaining, or an investor where you're gaining equity and you're not just working for money? You're not doing a time for trade. So Michael says he wants to be on a private plane with you, Garrett. That's funny. Yeah, you bring the plane, Michael, and I'm sure Garrett will happily be on that plane with you. That's funny.
I'll bring the plane.
You'll bring the plane. You can just call Grant up and bring the Cardone Capital. Yeah, you have good favor with Grant, right? You can just call him up for the Cardone Capital.
I'll borrow his plane. Yeah, I'll draw. Yeah, he might lose it in the next couple of weeks, but
it's a good story. So we'll go ahead and wrap here in a minute. I wanted to say a couple things before we wrap. We are planning to have another meeting. The next one is scheduled it's the first Wednesday of the month, so it'll be the 6th of May. And so we'll be here. Right now we have scheduled Matthew Owen, which is awesome. Matthew Owens is an amazing guy. He's a syndicator, done some great stuff. Really good guy. So he'll be here with us. We're also going to I'm going to try to get this replay of this call and upload it on YouTube and be able to share it with both on my page and Christina and Garrett's page. So you can kind of track it there. If you want to share it at all, it'll be available. But yeah, this has been great, Garrett. Any other parting thoughts that you have for anybody? I've actually, one question I love to ask is just maybe something that, for somebody who's a newer, somebody in real estate that's kind of getting started or maybe even that's been doing it for a while. Is there one kind of tool or resource or app or something that you use that helps when it comes to working in real estate?
So let's see. If you're just getting started, I think that you're entering into one of the worst and best times you could possibly be in, and it's the worst because it's going to be very tough maybe to get your first deal in this over the next couple months. But if you're patient, you wait it out, there's going to be a whole amazing set of things that you're going to pick up. Keep the knowledge coming in. Keep researching. Keep yourself up with the times. Build your network still. Your relational capital, I think, is super important. So, virtually right now, because you can't do these, events and stuff like that, just try to set up as many meetings with high-level people as you can, add value to them, and just dive into as much knowledge as you can right now, and just keep doing the things that you're doing as far as underwriting deals, whatever you're doing in that regard. You have downtime now in a way because not a lot of deals are happening in this moment, but you're set up for something amazing. And as far as like apps or, I like to use Crexy over like LoopNet or something. Reonomy is a good software that you can use to look up deals and just past owners and stuff like that. I mean, you could even get creative if you want and just bang the phones and call owners. And you'll learn a lot from doing that too. Like if you have a broker get you a bunch of CoStar data, have them be like set your parameters. And if you have a broker that you make a relationship with and you're like, hey, give me like all like 10 to 50 units in Houston in this region. Okay. Send me that list. You just start calling owners and asking them questions and seeing if they're sellers or whatever. You could dig up the deal, but you're probably going to learn a lot talking to these owners in the process. There's always some kind of takeaway that I get from calling owners. I'll put the Crexy in there. I know these guys are great.
Crexy.
Crexy.com.
Okay.
CREXI.com. That's a good site to go on. I like it better than LoopNet. LoopNet's weird now, but check out that one.
Awesome, Garrett. Well, thanks so much for being on the call. This has been good, man. And I know for each of you as well. I'm going to leave this up for a while. If you guys want to stay and chat a little bit, I can actually unmute everybody, and then you guys can feel free to kind of chat with each other. Or that might get to be kind of a madness. I guess we could try it. Afraid everybody's going to talk at the same time. Maybe we'll just leave it like this, and then the chat box here, you can just kind of feel free to use the chat box. We'll leave this. Yes, Ellis, that would be a cluster. So we'll just leave it here. And if you want to go ahead and chat, just continue to write stuff in there. Use this as networking. Use this as what you like. And thanks again for everybody for taking the time. But thanks so much, Garrett, for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Once again.
Absolutely. We'll have you live once the Corona crazy stops. We'll have you live again.
I'll come. I want to come back in person.
Yeah, that'd be great. We love it.